I just want to like take the microphone out and be like, ah. I'm so excited to introduce this person because his sobriety has made such a difference in my sobriety. And I I met Danny when the pandemic hit and a lot of us moved on to the Zoom rooms. And Danny came into my home group of Missoula Oasis Persists, telling his story. And he was telling a story and he talked about losing a sibling and staying sober through it. And I heard my own story. I heard experience, strength, and hope. And and I was able to form a connection to Danny in that moment. And it's just so interesting because right at that time, I didn't have a cohort of other alcoholics where they provided that the book talks about like we're not a glum lot. Well, I was kind of a glum lot at the time. And I needed crib mates. I needed people who had what I wanted and who inspired me to work the steps, work the program, become a nerd about my program, start healing. Like I needed that. I didn't have it yet. And through that group, I was able to get that and it completely changed my life. It completely changed my life. And so with Danny, you know, when we come into this program, we have this spiritual malady and we work the 12 steps and then that spiritual malady, it turns into something else, which I'm still trying to figure out what it is. It's very mysterious. But I know a lot of the times when it's directed in the right ways, it feels extremely joyful, like extremely joyful and connecting and otherworldly. And Danny has that. And so I was just talking to my sponsee, and she just said the most profound thing to me. And she was talking about how when we come into the rooms, um, we get to heal relationships that have nothing to do with AA, that are outside of AA through our interactions with other AA people. And I was like, this is why I'm a sponsor, because I'm learning so much. Like you just like changed my life again. And but that was Danny for me. I changed so many of my relationships that have nothing to do with him outside of the rooms because I love his sobriety. I love the joy he brings to our relationship. I love the way that he shows up when he says he's going to show up. I love the way that my kids adore him. They call him Uncle Danny. Oh my God. I mean, I just benefit so much from his sobriety. So, when there was not someone, when he said that there wasn't someone introducing him, I was like, oh, there is now. I'm coming. I love this guy. So, anyways, such a pleasure. And I'm so excited to hear probably like 6 or 8 things that are going to change my life because Danny just drops these amazing bombs casually.
I'm Daniel. I'm an alcoholic. Congratulations on 45 years. It's hard for me to wrap my head around, so, congratulations on 7 years. That's a lot of the time things really started just leveling out. Emotionally, at least. My sobriety date's November 16th, 2015. So this past November, I've just celebrated 8 years. And I never thought that was possible. I came in here and I heard people get like 6 months and 90 days and 9 months and a year and 18 months. And it's just like, how the fuck am I supposed to do that? So it's definitely, it's interesting to think about. and, being around these rooms for so long, um, I hear about people catching alcoholism in these rooms. They came in here, they heard a message and something clicked. It's just like, oh, I belong here. Just like I knew I belonged here. You know, from the first time I started drinking when I was 14 years old. You know, I once I start, I can't stop, and once I stop, I can't stay stopped. You know, it's been that way ever since I first started drinking, and doesn't matter what's going on in my life. I just want to get drunk. I want to get high. I want to get fucked up. You know, and I did that for a lot of years and caused a lot of wreckage within my family. And I really didn't understand how that looked until later on. Um, you know, I remember growing up and my dad leaving when I was like 3, just because he wanted to get drunk, and I was like, fuck him, right? And I had that idea for a lot of years, even in my sobriety. It's just like I carried that burden with me for all that time. And so when my son was born, yeah, I still wanted to get drunk and I still wanted to get high, but it was going to be different for me, right? It's going to be different. Things are going to like work out, you know, and sure as shit, they didn't work out. You know, throughout my drinking, I've been in jail, I've been in prison, I've been at 7 different treatment centers. You know, I just can't stop. I remember I was sitting in a jail cell and I called my mom because that's where I like to call it from. Um, and she said, "You get my message?" And I was like, "What message?" And she's like, "They found your dad, you know, drank himself to death." You know, I remember telling myself then, it's just like, I'm gonna do something different. You know, I'm gonna get to where I'm going. I'm gonna stop drinking. I'm gonna stop doing drugs. Things are gonna be different. I'm gonna be there for my son. Things are gonna work out. I'm tired of this. You know, that delusion lasted 6 months till I got to where I was going, and I was off and running again. You know, right back at it, right back in the same situation. And, you know, he just kept moving farther away from me because that's what I did, right? Through my alcoholism, it's just like I just pushed people away. And I could sit here and tell you that I care about him and I love him and I love my mom and I love my brother and I love all these other people. But the fact of the matter is that when I'm drinking and I'm getting high, I don't give a fuck about anybody in my life. You know, because in my experience, actions speak louder than words. And experience says that that is true. And that's a shitty reality to face. You know, so fast forward, you know, I get out of pre-release and I have a job and I get a place, and you know, I have a year of dry time. I call it dry time because I wasn't doing any drugs or anything, but or drinking, but it's just like I just wasn't doing anything. So I'm off running again and I start going to AA kinda, but it's more along the lines of look what I'm doing over here so you don't notice what I'm doing on the weekends. And then she's like, I never gave you a UA. This is like 3, 4 months after I got out. She's like, I never gave you a UA. And I was like, all right. So I like took a UA and she's like, what's going on? Stop drinking and stop doing drugs. It's like, I can do that. That's easy. I'm not going to jail. Let's go. You know, and that lasted 5 days. That thought where it's like, I could do that. That's easy. You know, and I'm off and running again. I came to that Monday, bunch of missed calls from a boss, bunch of missed calls from my PO. I'm in and out of jails, in and out of prison. I'm going back. You know, I just wanted to stop more than anything else in the world. And, you know, she told me to go to 90 meetings, 90 days. You know, and I just wanted it to stop. You know, my reality is that I'm going to drink myself to death like my dad did. And my mom's going to have to bury her youngest son. And because what I learned is that I'm doomed to an alcoholic death. And I remember I went to, not that night, because I went to a meeting that night and I left immediately afterwards. I showed up the next night. And this guy that I seen around, he asked me if I've been staying sober. And it's just like, for some reason, I was like, no. You know, I'm getting high and getting drunk again. It's just like, I can't stop. He's like, well, you're in a good place. You know, and I asked him to sponsor me. He said he'd be honored, and you know, we got in the Big Book for Alcoholics Anonymous to do the steps as they come up. But what I didn't realize is that once I sobered up, I had this idea that, you know, life would start kissing my ass. You know, it's just like, don't you know who I am? Like, I'm sober. Like, what the fuck? But that wasn't the case for me because my cousin Autumn passed away when I was 10 days sober. You know, and she was 2 months older than me. And my Aunt Pearl and all her kids, like, we grew up together. Like, there's like 10 of us that's within like 6 years of each other. And it's just like, we just grew up together and we like, God, it's a bunch of hell. And, you know, she passed away. And I remember going in my PO's office and pretty much begging her to let me go bury my cousin. She's like, I can't. There's no way I could get this approved because my family's back in South Dakota. And she's like, there's no way I could get this approved after all your violations that you just racked up. It's just like, I'm sorry. I would love to send you here, but I can't. So I stayed here and I got busy. You know, it's just like I didn't realize I knew I was an alcoholic. And I knew that once I started, I can't stop. And once I stop, I can't stay stopped. You know, and when I think about that now, you know, how foolish I am to think that I understood and I was able to intellectualize what it all means back then, when really back then I really didn't know shit from shit. And I was just like, you know, but you know, step 2, can't believe that a power greater than themselves creates towards insanity. It's just like, what am I saying about? Right? I'm pretty coherent. I know what's going on. You know, I'm insane to think that I could drink in safety. You know, I am, and it's just that simple, right? For me, it's just, it has to be that simple. You know, I wanted to sit there and I have no other options. I have no other options, right? Because that reality is still in the back of my head that I'm going to drink myself to death and the other foot's going to drop eventually. And all this shit about me not being in jail right now is just a facade, right? This has to work. I don't know if it will, but it just has to, right? There's no way that someone's sitting in here with 45 years sober. It's just like, that's just ridiculous. You know, but I just keep showing up. You know, and the third step is just like, I don't know, this is weird, it's awkward. You know, kneeling down with another man and saying a prayer is just like, I was like, that's weird. And immediately he's like, next we launching a course of vigorous action. And he gave me a notebook. And he said, write out a list of all your resentments, everyone you're mad at. And I was like, okay, I could do that. That's easy. You know, and the next week we meet and I was like, yeah, I didn't do that. You know, he's like, what are we doing, man? You know, and it's just like, I kind of jerk my feet through that process. You know, but every week or every couple of weeks, it's just like I show up with another calm done, feeling so proud of myself. He's like, all right, now next. And I was like, fuck. You know, but the guys I was hanging out with around this time, they were always saying like, you're the problem, you're the problem. It's just like shooting each other shit whenever they start complaining about their lives or whatever. And it was interesting because during this time, I was working on my 4-step and I started having that realization that, you know, I'm the problem. I can't point the finger at anyone else. My life is my making. And I was able to intellectualize that and be like, yeah, you know what? That's right. I am the problem. And, you know, I got done my 4-step and I met my sponsor and we went for a drive and did my 5th step. And afterwards, I just felt gross and I felt this ick and just like, do you want to, are you ready to have God remove every single one of these defects? He's just like, yeah, I don't want to feel like this. You know, so we said a prayer and the next day I got pissed and I was like, what the fuck? I just like prayed about this. Because I thought that's how it worked, right? You know, it's just like one and done, I'm good. You know, it's just like, but no, it's just like I'll go back to work. And I start making amends. And around this time, my cousin Nicole, she used to babysit us. She passed away. You know, it was about 6, 7 months sober. She passed away. And I go to my PO's office and things are going really good. And she's not on my back. And I'm starting having a sense of ease where it's like the other foot's not going to drop. Like everything's going to be okay. And then my cousin passes away. And I go back to South Dakota and I get to Rapid City and I meet my mom and it's the first time I seen her in a few years and I give her a hug and we start crying and she's like, "This is where you're gonna be staying. The boys don't like sleeping in the basement because like they're like 3 and 4, so it's just like they're scared of the basement because it's dark down there." I was like, "All right, cool." And during that time, I made amends to my mom. And she's like, "Yeah, you only did it to yourself." I was like, "No, what I did to you was wrong, right? Because I know what I did to my mom. I stole from her. I ran her from security. She didn't know where her kids were. She didn't know if we were even alive." And it's just like we cried, we hugged. But since then, I've been able to show up to be a son to my mom and not call her from jail, because, yeah. And then I seen my brother. And I remember this thought being in my head, it's just like, one's good enough, right? Let's not rush this amends thing. One's good enough, and he was in work release because he was in the middle of a bunch of violations. So he wasn't able to go to the res to bury Nicole. And for some reason, I had like this idea where it's like, I was in like the spiritual hilltop looking down on him. And it's just like, it's fucked up to admit, but that's where I was, right? It's like, what are you doing, dude? And I like feeling all high and mighty. And, he goes back to jail. And, I go to the res. We go to the res the next day. And, my cousin Nicole shows up in her casket and my Aunt Dawn, her mom's sitting there. And, she watches me. She's seeing how I'm acting. She's seeing what I'm doing. Because she doesn't trust me. She doesn't trust who she sees. She doesn't trust who I am. And then I knew that I'm the problem, right? I robbed my family of so much more than anything I could even describe, just like the emotional security, the physical security. They didn't understand who I was going to get. And it's kind of interesting because my name's Daniel. Everyone calls me Danny. And I remember Suzanne asked me, like, what do you prefer to be called? Dan, Daniel, Danny? And I was like, so what's funny about that is that when I was drinking and Dan showed up and I started referring to myself as Dan, Dan's an asshole. And when Dan shows up, you need to just leave me alone. And then I knew there was more work to be done because of that situation, and throughout this whole time of my sobriety, just like I start creating relationships with people and things suck. I'm sad. Things look up. Well, I get a job. I start doing concrete and really don't understand what any of the other steps mean. I'm just kind of coasting at this point. And I get a job doing concrete, and my second day on the job, I fall off a 4-foot wall, packing forms off a foundation, and ended up compound fracturing my tib and my fib right by my ankle. And I keep talking about drugs in the beginning of my story because I'm a drug addicted alcoholic who can't stay sober. And I go to the hospital, and first thing they do is just shoot me up with drugs. They're like, it's gonna play out, right? I'm freaking out, I'm panicking, I'm high, and people start showing up. People start showing up for me in my hospital room, and I never once thought that that was possible. People want to see me. People want to make sure that I'm okay. And I get out of surgery and I wake up, and the next day I wake up and people are already coming to my room, and they have their stuff to do, but they find time to stop by and say like, hey, and I go home and I have these pain meds, and I had AA around me. and eventually I was able to walk in my doctor's office and sit there and say, I no longer need these. Let's start working off them. And that's what we do. We come up with a plan and start taking lower doses and blah, blah, blah. And eventually it's just like I made it through that without abusing my pain medication. And, I have AA to thank for that. And then and I get a year sober. And I'm starting to learn how to walk again because it was a bad break, and I'm learning how to walk again, and things are like slow moving. And there was a few guys. I was going to California for a WIPOC conference, the Western Area Conference of Young People in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they just kept bugging me about going. And I was like, fuck it, like, let's go. I got a travel permit. We drove 16 hours right after the Missoula group. So the Missoula group gets over at 9 at night. We go to Lawrence's house, pick up his wife. We're on the road at 10. We drive all night. Things are crazy. We go to that conference, tired, sleep deprived, and we just started drinking a bunch of energy drinks, running around, screaming. It was crazy. But it opened my eyes to what service work was. Another thing happened during that conference. I had all these ideas when I came in about racism, all right? All the shit that I've been through and, everything that, just my experiences with it. And I had different ideas that I just didn't trust you guys. And I remember going to the street meeting in Sacramento, and there's a speaker there, there's this old native guy, and he starts talking about how he can't stop drinking and he keeps relapsing, and he's trying all these different ceremonies and sweats and talking to medicine men, and nothing's working. And he talks to someone and they say, sounds like you got the white man's disease. Maybe you should try the white man's medicine. And for some reason, when he said that, something clicked in my head to where I came back and I just jumped in, and that's going to come in play later on, hopefully, if there's time. But I jumped in and I switched sponsors, and, I started over. I got a sponsor, and, it's just like same thing. We got in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and did the steps as it come up. And the interesting thing is that when I think about the first step, for a long time, I used to just think about the powerlessness over alcohol. When I think about my life is unmanageable, is the more I start drifting away from this program and stop meeting with you guys and stop meeting with my sponsor and my sponsees, for some reason that I can't comprehend or I can't explain, life just starts piling up on me. I start dropping the ball in different aspects of my life. I start being really late for work all the time. I start getting a little more agitated. I stop paying my bills on time. And I start lying to my friends, and it's a fucking mess. And then it gets to a point to where it's like, something needs to change. Like, I don't know what's going on, Mike. He's like, sit down, man. And, but that was later on. And then the second step, if I look back at everything I just been through in the past year, 18 months, it's like everything I've been sober through is just like, yeah, this works, right? But I still had all these humanly powers, if you will, in my life. I still had all you AAs around me. In every situation that I've been in, I had someone around me, physically around me. But I didn't understand that until later on. Once again, the third step is just still awkward. Kneeling with someone, saying prayers is still weird. But once again, it's just like immediately we launched on a course of vigorous action, right? It gives me a notebook and it's like, you've been through this before, come back with your list, everything you're mad about. And I show up the next week and I don't got it done. You know, and he's a little more stern about it. He's like, what are you doing? Like, I was like, I don't know, I just figured we could like read a little bit and like just not talk about it. You know, and he's just like, we can't move forward until you get this done. So if you don't have it done, just shoot me a text and let me know, and like we'll just reschedule. I was like, fuck. My shit's not working with him. You know, and eventually I make it through my 4-step, and I'm starting going back to work, and things are starting to like look up, right? My legs getting better, my mental health's getting better. And then I have another surgery on my leg, and I just get depressed. You know, throughout my drinking, I never thought about hurting myself or killing myself. But in that time in sobriety, after my surgery, when I stopped having that sense of worth and that sense of purpose, you know, things start coming up. My head starts spinning. It's just, it's not like I wanted to kill myself, but it was definitely like just hurt myself. You know, and I dealt with that for probably a week. This is in the middle of my 4-step. And something just snapped. I just couldn't take it anymore. And you know, I broke down and I called my sponsor, and he's like, hey, what's up, man? I just start crying. I just start crying to him, and I can't even form words of what I'm feeling. And he just stays on the phone with me, and once I stop, he's like, so what's going on? Because I'm special and I'm unique, right? You guys don't know what I'm going through. You guys don't understand. You guys could walk. You guys have jobs. You guys have like everything going good for you. And I'm feeling sorry for myself because I can't walk again, and my legs fucked up, and I'm not working, and my bills are piling up. And I forgot that he's right there with me. He just had back surgery. He's not working. He's like, shit starts piling up for him. And he just told me, he's just like, there's not a day that goes by where I just don't think I'll hang myself, dude. Like, what's your kitchen look like? What do you mean? And he's like, what's your kitchen look like? I was like, it's kind of a mess. He's like, maybe you should do your dishes. Then I knew, right, that I'm not alone. That's big. You know, trust doesn't come easy for me because everyone in my life has either lied to me, stole from me, or there's always an angle. Yeah, that broke down a lot of different things about what I grew up with, about what it means to be a man throughout this process. You know, just like going through a 4-step. So who am I resentful at? This dude named Mike at work. It's kind of funny because when that was going on, Mike's my sponsor. Mike's dude at resentment. So what do you do? Me and him got in this big old fucking pissing match at work. Started cussing at each other. We were out in East Missoula. School buses getting out. A bunch of little kids running around. I was like, you fucking motherfucker. Boss was there. It was bad. It was bad, right? my my roommate at the time, Todd, was working with us, helping us finish out. So like the boss is there, Todd's there. I'm yelling at Mike. Kids are across the street. Parents are like, "What the fuck?" I get home. Todd's like, "What was that about, man?" I was like, "Motherfucker!" And I start yelling at him. And I call my girlfriend at the time. And I start cussing at her about it. And I meet my sponsor, and he's like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! When dealing with resentments, we what?" I was like, "I don't know." And he's like, "We put them on paper." And I was like, "Ah." First column, who am I resentful at? Mike. What did he do? He yelled at me in front of my boss. What did it affect? social, sexual, financial. I could not wait to yell at my girlfriend, my roommate, anyone else that would hear me about Mike because he fucking pissed me off. What was my part? What did I do to get the ball rolling? I called him bad names and accused him for stuff. But it took a while to get there, right? Because Mike was walking me through this step by step. And we got to that point, and I was like, yeah, but he did this. Yeah, but he did that. You know, it's just like, yeah, I did this, but he did that. And he's like, what did you do? Cut the bullshit. What did you do? Called him a pussy and I called him a little bitch. Yeah. But it took to the point to where it doesn't matter what he did for me to fully understand that. Right? Because until I'm able to totally ignore all that other shit, it's just like I'm useless. Hours, days, weeks, months squandered. He controlled me for that whole day. I let that situation control me. Right? And you get to the fifth column. What was I practicing? Selfish, self-centered, inconsiderate, scared to death, dishonesty. Right? All five of those. No wonder I'm fucked up. You know, he's like, you owe him an amends. And I was like, fuck. All right. Next day I go to work. He's sitting there and I was like, it's only me and him. I was like, hey. At the very least, don't talk to him like that. That's hard. There's no point in making amends to someone if you just continue doing the behavior, and I had to do that in sobriety, and that's a fucking shitty feeling. Right? You know, around this time things start piling up and I start cleaning them up and life's happening and I'm like clearing away and things are looking up. And I remember when I talked about me not making amends to my brother because it was too much at that time. I remember he was calling me and he was drunk for a whole summer. He called me at least once or twice a week. And me knowing what I know about alcoholism, the grave nature and the fatality that we deal with, and you know, we are doomed to an alcoholic death. Without this program, we are doomed to an alcoholic death. The day that I came in, I sobered up, my reality was I'm drinking myself to death. That's still my reality today. The difference is that you guys give me a chance of living a life that I didn't think was possible. If I don't have a solution, I'm doomed to an alcoholic death. So when I think about my brother drinking, he's killing himself. And there is nothing I can do about that. Except answer the phone. Show up for him in the only way that I know possible. You know, and talking to Todd and Mike and Trevor and all these guys about my brother killing himself and like just drinking, and no matter how many times I met with Mike and talked about it, you know, all the 4 steps I've written out about it, it's just like nothing prepared you for that day where mom says Richard passed away. And my first thought wasn't I want to get fucked up. My first thought was I need to get to my mom. You know, and eventually that happens, and I go back to my mom. And first night we're there, we're getting out a collage and we're making a collage, and she has all his baby pictures out and all these pictures of me and him. And, you know, it's just like I never got to make that face-to-face amends with him. You know, and just say I love you. You know, and it doesn't matter what we've been through or what we were fighting about or any of these other things that happened when we were 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, however long ago. You know, I love you. And what can I do to make it right? I remember the day before his funeral, sleep deprived, yelling at kids. So someone passes away in our family, they go to the hall and someone stays there all weekend or from the moment they get there to the moment we bury them, because in case anyone shows up, they could say goodbye. You know, and if someone needs to be there in case it's like 3 or 4 in the morning, because that has happened, because people just do it when they can, I guess. I don't know. But I stayed up with him. You know, on the night before his funeral, I remember we were sitting there. My mom stayed with us that night because Jim took the kids back to the hotel, and it was me, my mom, and my cousins, and then everyone starts showing up, and you know, everyone starts drinking, and it's just me, just a mess. You know, my mom wasn't a big drinker, and she didn't drink that night. So for the longest time, it's just like me and my mom hanging out together. You know, someone passes me that bottle, and I didn't even take it. It's just that I don't drink. You know, I just like that's not me. That's something way bigger than me. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, in that moment, I knew that this worked, right? I had all these ideas where it's just like, yeah, maybe this, maybe that, but I still put all these things that I stayed sober through, like Tom, Mike, Lee, Trevor, Ian, all these other people that was around me. And in that moment, I knew that my higher power kept me sober, and I really didn't understand what that meant. But I knew that's what it was. And, you know, I come back and I'm a fucking mess. You know, I meet my sponsor, I'm feeling worse. I go to meetings, I'm feeling worse. I go to my service position, I'm feeling worse. You know, and after the meeting one night, this guy walks up and asks me to sponsor him. And I said, yes. You know, we start meeting, he starts showing up. It's interesting about, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, you know, sponsorship. Because I told him, like I tell everyone else, is yeah, call me tomorrow. We'll figure out a time to meet up and go through the big book and do this episodes that come up. You know, some people don't call. You know, when I think about that, I think about how it works, and it's like we're ready to take certain, we're ready to go to any lengths to stay sober, and we're ready to take certain steps. Well, essentially, ready to go to any length. It's like, are you willing to pick up the phone? The answer is no. Then it's just like I can't do anything for you. If you're not willing, there's nothing I can do. But then I started reading Dr. Barber and the Good Old Timers with another sponsee that's been around for a little bit. You know, if you haven't read that book's fucking amazing. You know, it talks about the way they tossed it back then. They pretty much had people live with them for X amount of time. And every day they'd show up, and if you didn't answer, they went looking for you. And I'm not willing to pick up the phone and call someone back or check on them. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Right? It's like, what more can I be doing? And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And it's just like quite a bit. You know, and the whole time I had a service position. Got my whole sobriety since I was 6 months sober, because I read in the meeting format, the Missoula group, you have to have 6 months sobriety before each chair meeting. And I've been showing up and someone asked me to chair, and I was like, I don't have 6 months sober, can't do it. Sorry. The night after I got 6 months sober, someone asked me to chair the meeting, and I was like, I'm not going to do it tonight. And the dude that I first said, I don't have 6 months, I can't do it, sorry, he was there. He's like, fuck that. You say you don't have 6 months, you have 6 months, do it. And I was like, shit. You know, and since then, I like been involved in service and just holding different service positions. And, you know, COVID happened and it shut down the world, and the Missoula group opened back up, and they had like a limit to like 20 people, 15 people, something small. And every night someone was getting turned away. someone showed up for a meeting and like, we can't let them in because we're at capacity per the rules. And that just didn't sit right with me. And at this point, Anna asked Ian to speak, and I was cheering for Ian. So when I got asked to speak from Anna, I asked Ian to speak for me. So I knew that there was some kind of Zoom meeting going on. And then I called her and I was like, hey, is there a meeting going on? Like, what's that schedule like? And she's like, there's a meeting right now. And sent me the link. And I jumped in, and that's where I met Suzanne and so many other people. That meeting saved my life. I showed up to that meeting and I became a part of for probably like a year and a half. You know, and I always say that, you know, when you see someone walk through the doors, you don't know what kind of impact they're going to have in your life. You know, and that's very true, whether it's like you start sponsoring them or they start calling you and they find another sponsor, or, you know, they just continue to show up and then see them get a part of the service structure and start showing up and being a part of, you know, creating the fellowship that they crave. You know, it's really amazing. And, you know, I don't know what's next for me on my service journey, because the slash rotation, Trevor nominated me to be the DCM for District 81. And I said, yeah, I'm willing, because I knew how much time was involved in that. Really didn't understand what that job meant. But I knew I could figure it out. And, you know, I said yes. And since that time, I started meeting people, and people started recognizing me and saying, hey, it's good seeing you. And, you know, you see all these different people from different states. And, you know, it's just like, it's really, really amazing how big AA is and how so this past month, I was telling Jim that I went to Minot for the West Central Regional Service Conference. People have opinions, and they're not scared to say their opinions on the floor about whatever the situation is, and they start yelling around and, you know, you can't change this and you can't do that, and we don't have this and we don't have that, and everyone's just like two totally conflicting ideas bumping heads. You know, and I was just like, what the fuck, right? And like they're saying stuff that's just like, what are you talking about? Like that has nothing to do with what we're discussing. And then Connie, our past delegate, said, you know, it's pretty amazing to be part of a conference that you see people so passionate about AA. You know, you see people that's so passionate about AA that they want to keep it the way it is because it works. And you get people that's so passionate about AA that they want it to be open and available to everybody pretty much. And what we're doing is we're trying to find a common ground and moving forward how to best carry the message to the still suffering alcoholic. You know, in doing so, all these ideas I have about racism and, you know, me being Native and growing up with all that and continually showing up in a service structure where it's predominantly white is it's very interesting. So when Jerry asked me to be part of a pamphlet committee to rewrite the North Native American pamphlet and totally reworking that pamphlet, I said, yeah, sure, not really understanding what it's about, but it's like, you know, we have roughly 2 million members in Alcoholics Anonymous. About 1.4 million are in the United States and Canada. Out of those numbers, 39,000 are Native American. That's roughly 2.5%, maybe 3%. If you think about that 39,000 members that's part of AA, that's sober. There's 10 million members in the United States and Canada that's Indigenous. That's less than 1/3% that's sober. We don't sober up. You know, and when I first came in the rooms, Todd, Frank, and Sean and Mike, and it's just like, they're like, it's a big deal you're here, right? You know, where you came from, growing up from the res and all this other stuff, that's a big deal you're here. And I knew it was a big deal, but I didn't understand, right? Because it's just like, I know we don't sober up. I've been to more funerals since I've been sober than the whole time of my entire life. And it's all due to alcohol and drugs. We don't sober up until I see someone else come in the rooms. That's Brown. And they start sticking around. And life starts coming up for them. And when I go to Minot, North Dakota and see so after the conference, we're like, there's a meeting at 2. We're gonna go get some food and go to the meeting. And I was like, okay. So I go to that meeting and there's like 10 other natives in that meeting. And this one dude starts sharing about, you know, growing up in the res and eating Kamad cheese and like all this other stuff. And like, I'm fucking laughing my ass off. And I look around the rooms and like half the rooms just like looking at me like you guys are. And I'm just like dying laughing. And it was just reassuring that there's still hope, there's still time, you know, and all the different pamphlets that's coming out and everything that's in the works of AA. How can we best carry the message to the still serving alcoholic, right? And so there's a trans pamphlet coming out, there's an unhoused alcoholic pamphlet. There is Asian American pamphlet that's up for consideration, right? We could sit there and like think about all these different ideas of, is it fiscally responsible for us to be making pamphlets at this point in AA because we just got out of the deficit, but we're good right now, you know, all these other factors. But if I think about that, I think about my primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Those pamphlets aren't for me. Everything that we're talking about at the general service isn't about me. It's for someone else that's still out on the streets because they feel different because they're so fucking special that they can't see past to understand that you're an alcoholic. Have a seat. And it goes back to my 12-step thing, right? What more can I be doing? Is it worth consideration to talk about this stuff? If it saves someone's life, yeah. Fuck yeah, it is. Right? Sponsees, I don't hear from them for a little bit. Is it worth me fucking picking up the phone and seeing if they're still alive? Yeah. You know, granted, I might not get an answer. I might get hung up on like last time, but you know, that doesn't matter. Right? What more can I be doing as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous that's in the service structure? Am I doing enough? Am I doing everything I can to carry this message? Right? I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Before closing, let us remember that anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all of our traditions. On a personal level, tell anyone you wish that you are an AA member, but please do not reveal the identity of anyone else. You can find an audio recording, it's just audio, black screen. And past speakers on our YouTube channel. And the channel is at Sunday Speaker. So the full address is youtube.com/at Sunday Speaker. You can also search for the Sunday Speaker. Are there any announcements? Danny, do you want to lead us out in the Lord's Prayer today? Sure. Lord's Serenity Prayer, whatever.